Welcome to the Hacking Your Health podcast with Ben Canning and Dave Kennedy. Two guys heading out to hack body, mind, business, and beyond. We are here to provide a single source, bullshit-free guide to understanding your body and how you can live better for longer.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Just before we get into this week's podcast, I'd like to take a second to say two things. Number one, thanks for tuning in once again. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for every listen, every download, every watch. Secondly, if you can take time to subscribe to wherever you listen to or watch us, it would be greatly appreciated, and it would do a lot for us and the show. Thanks. Enjoy this week's episode. Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. I am Ben Canning.
I'm Dave Kennedy.
And this is Hacking Your Health Podcast. What is up, dude?
Another episode of Hacking Your Health Podcast. It's exciting, man. I love these days. I love hanging out and shooting the shit and talking about fitness and our journeys. So it's always good.
Do you sometimes forget that like other people listen to this? Like I sometimes feel like you and I are just having a conversation, and then people come back to me like, "Oh, listen to this," and I'm like, "Oh shit, yeah, other people listen to that stuff."
You know what's the weirdest feeling is when like you meet somebody in real life, and it's not that obviously computers aren't real life or whatever, but when you meet somebody in real life, you're like, "Oh yeah, I listen to your podcast religiously." You're like, "Man, you know so much about me that I know nothing about you." Like it's kind of awkward because like you're like, "Hey, yeah, I've talked about like everything, on this podcast," and so it's like one of those things where you forget a lot of times that there's a lot of people listening to this. So I do get that, but I also think that's a strength too because you did the live news with me that one time when we were in when you were in town.
I wouldn't say I did the news with you.
You were next to me when I was doing it, and but it's the same feeling there. You don't really think that you're on the news talking to millions of people. You're just there and there's a camera in front of you and you're listening to a news anchor. So it's really a one-on-one. I think that's why podcasts and things like that work so well because, you're comfortable with that human setting of one-to-one. You're not really thinking about it as, hey, I'm speaking one-to-many. So I enjoy it. And for all you that listening,
thanks.
Thanks.
I'm sorry at the same time.
Yeah.
But it's funny because like I have to shout out a couple of people. Well, number one, Monica from the Hack Script, she's like, I've almost caught up in the podcast. So we're 8 weeks in. Today was the 8-week check-in. And whenever I first had the call with her, she was just starting. I was like, oh my God, you've listened to like 73 hours of me and Dave talking. I'm like, I am so sorry. But then a couple of recent, Jason put in this thing in his check-in this week that he started the podcast at episode 1 and now he's on episode 5. I'm like, in this check-in, I was like, I'm kind of pissed that you've only started listening to the podcast now, but at the same time, thanks. So yeah, my goal this year and sort of starting it this year is to start to reshare all the episodes that, are 74 weeks old now. But yeah, he says he got a lot of valuable tips from the first 5. So I think we're doing a pretty good job, or we have done a pretty good job until this point.
Yeah, agree. Well, I mean, what do you say up until this point? Does that mean like from here on out, we're totally screwed?
No, we're going to get better.
Okay, that's right.
Anyway, how has your week been?
Good. It's been a solid week. Nothing major to report as far as issues or problems, but it's been a good solid lifting week. I PR today on chest flies, which was a nice one. I was actually because my heavy push days are earlier in the week on Monday, and it's kind of flipped on Friday, which is more heavy shoulders and then lighter on chest. On Friday, and I was eyeballing those 125-pound dumbbells. I was like, man, should I try? I'm like, I'm not going to do it today. I'm not going to try. So I'll wait till Monday again to try to beat your record. So, but no, it's a good week, and feeling strong, feeling the best I ever have. So it's been great.
From Monday, my calories significantly increased. So I mean, you get if it's going to happen, that's the day for you to do it because like. This week I'm on 2,300 calories. From Monday I'm on 2,750, and I know what happens. That's like time to go.
Peak energy.
In terms of
That's peak energy.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're going to do it, Monday's the time because I'm going to be
shooting up.
Yep.
Well, I still got you at deadlifts, so
for now. No, things are good with me. Like I said to you just before we hit record there, I've just been sitting going through everybody's check-in from the Hacks program today, and I've been trying to put together some video footage, and I was actually going through some of the footage that Ryan took of us in your gym, and I'm like, oh man, I'm keen to get back over to get some lifts in, and excited to see the next time that we train where we'll be at.
I'm excited about that as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. That's gonna be really cool. I'm excited about it. And the gym is very new in many cases because I got a lot of new pieces of equipment and new gadgets and things to try. So, it's always an evolving gym. So I might need to get a secondary expansion put onto that just to continue to hold what I keep adding there. Yeah.
And do you need a secondary, like maybe a more up to date version of Cardi B?
I do, and make it taller. You got to make sure it's taller. This
Actual
time.
size.
Actual size. It can't be mini Ben here.
Cool. Right. So this week we're going to revisit nutrition. Is that
nutrition? Well, I mean, we've talked about this before in the past, and I think it's really important for folks to understand that probably the single most fundamental thing that you could do and change to have an impact on your health and fitness goals is nutrition. And, we talk about the 4 pillars and what those are, mindset being one and, nutrition being kind of the second. And you have to have the right mindset, obviously, to get into the nutritional aspects. But from a nutrition side, people always struggle with, the same questions we see over and over and over again. How do I get enough protein? How much is enough protein? What should I be doing? What should I be eating? When should I be eating? How do I, carve, my hunger appetite? And what does that mean as far as like how many calories I should be getting and what I should be doing? And I think, we are taught that, hey, you can kind of eat whatever you want to, or if you go on keto or something else, that you'll magically lose the weight. And then if you do cardio on top of that, you'll magically lose even more weight. And so everybody just kind of defaults to cardio and doing some kind of crazy diet that gets them into some sort of, thing. And I have a friend of mine. It was funny. Do you have friends that like you want to help them, but they're not receptive to feedback, so you don't like opine? So
friends that have asked you for help many, many, many times, and you give it to them, and then they come back and they didn't do the shit that you told them before.
Well,
and they're like, "Can you help me with it this time?" And you're like, "Well, yeah, but I'm just going to tell you the same thing I told you last time." And they don't do it, and then again. So you get to the point where you're like, "Nah, fuck you, you're on your own."
So I have those, but I'm talking more so about the friends that won't ask you for help and won't take your feedback, as in like almost like they know the right way to go. And even though you've had a lot of success somewhere and getting perspective, like their way has to be the right way. And so they won't. And so I have a friend that went on a bunch of different diets last year. And, the big one was keto for them. So they're on keto and, they're taking MCT oil and doing this other stuff. And they had success with it. They dropped like 20 pounds. Okay. And I was like, hey, congratulations. What do you think you're going to do when you come off of keto? I was just asking, curious. And he's like, oh, I'm just going to stay on keto forever. I'm like, okay, well, that cool. I can't interject, right. In that. So it's because it's just that type of relationship. And so I talked to him, and just cool. Congratulations on that's amazing. 20 pounds. You'll be complimentary and uplifting, and congratulatory of their progress. But knowing that there's like a 99% chance that person's going to fail at what they do, because you're not going to be able to eat that for long term. And some people can. Again, it's not saying this isn't a blanket statement. It works for some people, especially those that have like type 2 diabetes and other things. Hey, it's a phenomenal type of thing for it. But long term type of crash diets, or whatever the heck there's like the it's like a cleanse where you're basically drinking nothing but detox. Like weird detox for like 6 or 7 days or something like that, and people are like angry and upset, and I'm like, it just is not sustainable. You can't do a detox for the rest of your life, right? So this person went through and did keto, and then eventually started slipping a little bit. Oh, I just had some carbs here, and all of a sudden now they're eating normal meals, but they're eating more healthy meals is what they claim. And then they, gain 20, 30 pounds back again. And that's exactly what happened this time. But what was nice to hear this time around was, I need to stop doing these crash course diets and focus more on my nutritional aspects and how do I get a hold of what I'm eating. And then he actually asked me, what do you do? And I was like, okay, that's my entry level into be able to have a discussion.
It's time. I've been waiting for this.
Yeah, I've been waiting so long for this. Like, thank you so much for asking me this question, because I've been wanting to tell you. I didn't say that, but I've been wanting to tell you this forever. And yeah, it is so. You don't want to come off as somebody that's like, hey, this my way is the best way or whatever. Whatever works for somebody may not work for another person. May not work for another person. There's different situations that we all have. Our bodies are all different. Our diseases or ailments or injuries are all different. So one way isn't the best for other, but what is real is how our bodies process food, and that's consistent across the board, and calories in versus calories out, which is consistent across the board. Our bodies, live and breathe off of ATP, which is how we create energy, and thermodynamics or thermogenics, and how we create heat in order to expunge energy. So like our bodies work in a very specific way. We have to burn energy, just like we have to put gas in a car to drive. If you have no gas or battery charge or whatever, can you drive that car? Does it work? Well, no. So you have to do the same thing. What happens if you put too much gas in a car? You just keep pumping and keep pumping and keep pumping and keep pumping. What's going to happen?
It's going to overfill. It's
going to overfill, right? And you're going to shoot gas everywhere, right? So there's only so much gas you could put into a car for that amount of energy that it's designed for. The mechanics, the weight of the car, how it's designed to work and operate. You put too much gas in the car, it's not designed to handle that. It doesn't, it overflows and it doesn't hold the gas. Very similar to how our bodies work, but unfortunately, it doesn't always remove the gas. It adds that in as far as fat. So, our bodies are incredible things. And there are things that are kind of by design, because our bodies never thought we'd get to this point where we had so much food available that we would never be hungry. So, by design, there are some flaws in how we do things, which is if we overeat, our body continues to put on fat in order to maintain energy when there are cycles where we don't have food. But when we have unlimited food and we just keep eating more and more and more, and we keep adding more and more fat, and we keep doing all these things, we're going to continue to add that weight. So at the end of the day, we have to be mindful of what we're eating and how we're eating and what we're doing in today's age, because, we're not going hungry anymore. We're not starving anymore. We have access to readily available foods, high caloric foods that have a low fill rate in our bodies and for our triggers and our brains. So these are things that we have to discuss from a nutritional perspective, because if you're coming into 2023 saying, there was a meme that I saw that's like the first mistake you're going to make, and it had somebody writing 2022 and then putting a 3 at the end of it. We're going to have those for a few days.
I've been doing that all morning, typing in dates and like, fuck.
Wrong one.
Yeah.
But there are things that we have to understand, that it's not just resistance training. It's not just cardiovascular work. It's not just taking supplements. It's the nutritional aspects. And the thing I'll before I pass it over to Ben, the thing that you can, to try to relate to, if you have your nutrition down pat, you can lose as much weight as you want to without having to do any cardio or any type of exercise whatsoever, even any type of movement. Now, is that the best route for you cardiovascular wise and health wise? Probably not, but you can lose all the weight you want to, specifically by understanding your nutrition.
Yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't recommend, but you can definitely do it, because, we've spoken before about it. I've spoken to clients before about it. And even, clients who have just went just the nutrition and just the cardio aspect, like they get to the goal weight or the goal that they want to do, and they don't necessarily look or feel like they thought they would. And essentially that is why we recommend to do weight resistance training, because obviously that will help with your overall aesthetic and muscle building and whatever else. I want to just quote quickly Kevin from the Hacks group, because you just mentioned there about the A to B stuff. In his biggest lesson from the week, it is realizing that this isn't a one and done type of program, but instead a transformation into a new lifestyle. And that is exactly what I want to get across. And
spot on.
Yeah. My feedback to him was, even with that sort of transformation into a new lifestyle, it will be ever evolving. It's not like we will get there in X amount of time. Like, it will change and continue to change over time. And I had another call earlier on this afternoon, and they were sort of talking about, and I've mentioned this to you recently, I think they were talking about the frustration with doing the things that used to work for them and not getting the same result that they had before. And I'm the same essentially whenever I think back to, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever I just stood in the gym floor and did 30,000 steps a day and ate out of Tupperware 6 meals a day. I don't live that same life, and I don't live that same lifestyle. So the lifestyle that suited me then to stay in shape was fine for then, but that isn't my lifestyle now. So knowing that this is a lifestyle and knowing that it's the goal is to be better and, you know, stay in shape and feel better and whatever else, but knowing that that will have to adapt and evolve over time is definitely an important one.
Yeah, and that adaptation of what you're doing, what's in your life, those are all things that can throw wrenches in your health. You know, what you're doing from a habit. Yeah. What's a spanner?
A wrench,
spanner?
but it's thrown a spanner in the works. Is the
spanner the works? Oh,
yeah.
I was like, "What's a spanner?" I was going to try to agree with you, but then I didn't know what it was, so I couldn't elaborate. It's like when you say, "When I write in my diary," you mean your notebook?
Yeah.
Like your schedule? Yeah, like your planner.
Yeah.
We don't call it diaries. Your diaries are like something intimately personal that you like write your thoughts in, or
like
something
Dear
like that.
Diary today.
Yeah, like Dear Diary
called me out on the podcast about.
We don't say diary for a calendar or anything.
Okay,
like that.
so it's in my calendar. I did, just to totally derail the conversation, the call that I was on earlier on. It was a very rare occasion when I wasn't speaking to an American, and I was like, "Hey, you can have access to my my cell," and I was like, "Oh no, well, I mean mobile." Like, I'm not, sorry for speaking American. So I have taken on board some Americanisms for sure.
You have taken some Americanisms. Got it.
Yeah.
No, but the comment there around it being kind of a framework or a lifestyle that you home in around is what makes us successful as this journey continues, right? And you know, it takes a long time to develop those habits and to get into the right type of regiment and, you know, get to the right spots. But once you have a foundation of understanding of how your body works, you have a foundation of these habits and what works, and you have a foundation of the things that you can do to impact that. It's just making tweaks one way or the other to try to really balance that, right? You know, if you're gaining weight, eat less food, right? Or certain types of food. If you're not getting the gains you want to in the gym, well, lift heavier, you know? So there are things that we can do to make tweaks into these programs. Or, you know, a good example, if we're gaining weight, but we still want to eat the same type of food, well, let's incorporate something else onto it. You know, a lot of times in our training programs, Ben, you'd be like, hey, I need you to add, you know, 2 20-minute biking sessions in there. Well, 2 20-minute biking sessions is really easy to do. It's not super strenuous, but probably burns, you know, an extra 300 calories or 400 calories or something like that, right? So we're adding that calorie burn into something that is really non-invasive to my schedule. 20 minutes is absolutely nothing. And it's one of those things that, you know, you could do pretty easily, but it's just tweaking things to, and it's interesting how you do that too. So like if I'm at, let's just say 2,500 calories and I'm not losing weight fast enough, instead of dropping my calories drastically or dropping my calories at all, you'll incorporate, hey, I want you to get an extra 2,000 steps a day or 1,000 steps a day, or, you know, do an extra 20 minutes on the bike twice a day. That's going to, or twice, not twice a day, but twice a week. But those things will burn calories, which ultimately, if I'm eating the same type of calories, 2,500 calories, I start to shave those down and I start to burn more, and I should start to see the results of that weight. So, you know, it's the minor things that we can do to kind of assist our lifestyle, our programs, and what we can do that make us successful. But at the end of the day, if we don't have a solid foundation around nutrition, none of that's going to work. If you don't know what you're eating, how much you're eating, you don't know the types of food that you're eating, those are all going to be problematic. And I will say, you know, being a former obese guy, you know, food was my religion, right? You know, like I loved food. Now it was never like, I never like enjoyed like sweets or candies and things like that. Like I wasn't, you know, obsessed with that. But I was obsessed with portion sizes. Like I'd go into a restaurant or a restaurant and be like, okay, what meal here do I feel has the most portions that I can eat? Because I don't feel like a lot of these would fill me up, you know? And fill me up's relative. Like, do I really need to be eating 2,000 calories in a sitting? Well, no. You know, but I had to have that full feeling of just like completely eating everything off of my plate. And that was my habit, right? And I think a lot of it's ingrained from when I was a kid too. Cause, you know, like I remember, you know, being taught as a kid, I have to eat everything on my plate. And so that just kind of morphed into, I have to eat everything on my plate. But if I order bigger portion sizes, I can still eat everything off my plate. You know, and so, and in America, you know, we don't skimpy on the portion sizes at all. No, so
definitely.
No. So it's one of those things that, you know, I think culturally we have an issue with from a portion size perspective, as well as the amount of calories. but also I didn't understand what I was actually eating. And then I, do these crash diets. I would do, Shaun T's Insanity, 6 times a week where I just murder myself. And, I dropped 20 pounds and I go back to eating a ton of food again. And, it was just this cyclical effect where I just couldn't get control of it. And I'm not going to say that cutting down on food is easy. It's not, it's especially if you're addicted to food or addicted to portion sizes like I was. It's one of those things that, it takes time to break those habits because you're so used to doing that over and over and over again. And I think that's why a framework around counting calories and understanding what you're putting into your body sets a restrictive expectation of discipline in you and what you have to do. And when we talk about counting calories, calories are broken down into really 3 categories. You have fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. Fats being the thing that, has essentially a 1-to-1 conversion. So that means if I eat, 1 gram of fat, if I don't use that 1 gram of fat, it immediately gets put into your fat store. So the more fat you eat, the more that you don't burn off of that fat, it is automatically put into your body as fat. Okay. Now everybody's like, hey, carbohydrates are terrible for you. Carbs are bad. Carbs are bad. Cut carbs. Carbs are one of the most beneficial things I think we have. Now, again, if you have type 2 diabetes or you have, pre-diabetes, there's definitely things you want to watch there and obviously advise, your doctor for these. But carbohydrates are one of the most explosive things that we have in our bodies. Carbohydrates are, if you look at the data of what happens when we actually eat carbohydrates, it's like an immediate push of energy throughout our body. And it has a conversion to fat if we don't use it, but that conversion's less. So let's just say, I can't remember the exact statistic. I think it was like 70% conversion of that could be moved to fat. Okay. So basically if you eat, 1 gram of carbohydrates, for that, you don't use 70% of that. The conversion, the burn of that to convert it to fats based on that process is about 70%. So you're not really getting a 1-to-1 calorie mark there. But carbohydrates are energy, and there's different types of carbohydrates. There's, simple and complex. Carbohydrates, simple being immediate energy, your fruits, obviously sugars that you can eat, candy bars, that type of stuff is going to spike your glucose. Starburst for pre-workout has been my thing. So, and then complex, which is going to be more of your longer term carbohydrates that give you a nice burn throughout the day that it takes some time to digest in your body. And so, carbohydrates and positioning those throughout the day can help you with your energy levels. And then your proteins, which are, you always hear about protein being centric. Well, protein is really the fundamental building block of muscles, right? And your ability to maintain muscles. So if you don't have adequate protein, your body will start to eat away at your muscles and you start to lose those muscles. So getting ample protein is good. Protein breaks down into what we call essential amino acids or branched chain amino acids, which are then used to leverage that for muscle building and protein synthesis and ATP, everything you hear about from that side. So, so those are the things that protein does. Now, finding a balance of what you need to do from there is where we start to kind of kick off and say, well, hey, what are you at? What are your calories? What are your age? Let's calculate how many calories you need. And then from there, start to build down what you need to eat from a calorie perspective and sticking within that for a bit.
Do we need to talk about how accurate I was in terms of what your basal metabolic rate was and where we programmed your maintenance calories? So
Ben was extremely off on calculating my calories. So we just throw that out there. So there's 3 concepts to understand. So when we talk about basal metabolic rate or your total daily energy expenditure, these are things that are what you burn on a daily basis if you do absolutely nothing. Okay, so in your normal day, you wake up, you maybe do some walking or something, maybe you don't do anything, maybe you're very much sedentary, very common in our industry, and based on your height, your weight, and your age and gender, those are things that calculate your total daily energy expenditure. So that's what we call maintenance. Maintenance is if I eat these calories, this amount of calories, the same amount of time throughout the day, I'll stay the same weight. I'm able to maintain my weight. Now, if you have a caloric surplus or a calorie surplus, that's going to be when you eat more calories than your maintenance. So if you eat more calories, then you have a fat conversion, right? And one thing I forgot to mention on protein, by the way, protein has like a 30% conversion rate to fat. It's like really low. It's like 20 or 30% conversion rate to fat. So the more proteins you eat, it's actually less of that actually goes to your fat stores, which is great because if you have a protein-centric diet, less of that is actually going to store as fat. It's a really hard conversion for your body to take protein into fat. So that's a good thing. So some magic you can play with in your macros to feel fuller. If you have a high protein diet, you usually feel fuller longer as you start to go through things versus if you're just eating, Pop-Tarts. You can eat like 500 Pop-Tarts and burn 5,000 calories and you still feel hungry. But your surplus is going to be if you have more calories than you're consuming. From a maintenance perspective, you're going to gain weight, right? Deficit being if you shave calories off. And a big problem that I'll first state with nutrition is most people try to shave too many calories off. And what happens is your body starts to shut down and starts to take away the things that you do from an energy perspective. You just feel like total crap. You feel, lethargic, non-energetic. You don't want to do anything. You get depressed. You get hangry. All these things start to happen when you have too less of calories. So it's really a delicate balance of slight deficits, slight surpluses to get to those desired results. But you have to remember these things take time. Okay. Now, recently I was on a deficit to do a cutting phase. Now we talked a little bit about bulking and cutting on the last podcast, so I'm not going to go into all the details, but basically I was at a heavier weight in order to maximize muscle gain. And I needed to shed off the fat that I had built as a byproduct. So eventually, I went all the way from, I think this time around we were at like maybe 3,600 calories at my peak, or 3,700. I think that was the highest we went.
Yeah.
And then eventually I was down to 2,000. And this took time, by the way. It takes a long time to get down to 2,000 calories. So you gradually, take your body from high amount of calories, high deficit or high surplus, start to reduce those calories. So, Ben had put me down to eventually 2,000 calories to shave the weight to get down to my desired goals from a body fat percentage, weight, etc. Well,
which we did.
Which we did. Like, it was very successful. It's the best I have looked. I felt. I mean, I sent you the picture of the abs today. I'm like, abs are clearly defined. I was like, man, I have like defined, like pretty big looking abs there. I'm like, this is great. I felt good today. Well, and most of it, it's the best I've looked. And it's taken 2.5 years to get to this point, but it's like crazy to think like in another 2 years, like I could be even bigger and even more. Like I can't wait. Anyways, get excited about the shit. Anyways, so if you're in the deficit side, and I was in the deficit side, eventually I'm coming out of this to start to go more into a muscle building phase. And so I go into maintenance, especially around the holidays. Ben put me in maintenance. So Ben put me at 2,500 calories for maintenance, which is, what he calculated as what would be my total daily energy expenditure. If I should be able to use those calories and not gain or lose weight, for the most part. And I had done my InBody scan, which measures my muscle mass, my height, my weights, everything else. And it has some really great detail that we discovered. And one of them was my basal metabolic rate, or my total daily energy expenditure. And it had me at 2501 as my basal metabolic rate. So Ben definitely hit it spot on, although I would have enjoyed those extra 1 calories per day over the holidays, Ben, but it's okay. Not everybody can be 100% perfect.
No, I know. I mean, I'll get better.
You're 99.9. So.
I'll get better next time. Right. So I think there's so much to unpack in the nutrition conversation. The first thing that I want to say is the maintenance phase is something that's often overlooked. And if it is your goal to go from a surplus to a deficit, or from a deficit to a surplus, you should always have some level of maintenance phase in between to allow your body to sort of acclimatize and sort of actually establish where you're at a normal weight. So essentially, like, we do maybe 4 to 6 weeks. And that's actually what I've been doing for the past, 8 weeks, probably, to sort of see like where my weight stays, like what to sort of own the weight is probably what I would say is if I was doing your check-in, to sort of see where we're at with things and then go whatever direction that you want to go. So I think that that's often overlooked. And again, I had a call yesterday with a client that we're talking about the difference in feeling from going from high calories to low calories. And we established that the difference was too much. So we brought it back down and sort of met in the middle to go through that sort of maintenance phase. The other thing that I would say is what you're saying about the cardio and the 20-minute sessions and stuff like that. One of the things that I try and do across the board is make anything that we do, as much as possible. I realize that I do ask a lot probably off of everybody, but as much as possible, try and make it as manageable as I possibly can, in terms of I don't like to run on extremes all of the time. And the reason that I say all of the time is probably because I've changed my mind on that recently. And I know that there is times that we can push things and can sort of really take things to the extreme to see sort of what the result is and how quickly we can get there. But the reason that I do it that way is, and I would probably, again, if I was doing the check-in, call it running on fine margins. And what I mean by that is, I don't like to go super low on calories. If we're talking about fat loss, I don't like to go super low on calories for all those reasons that you talked about essentially being pissed off with everybody, about being hungry, about being lethargic, about not wanting to do anything. And it's just not good for anybody involved. The same as well, I don't want everybody to be doing loads and loads of cardio because it's time consuming, and it's not realistic, and it's not something that's sustainable. And again, the same with steps. Like, I don't want everybody to be like, right, okay, we're going to do 1,200 calories and we're going to do an hour of cardio every day, and I want everybody to do 20,000 steps. It's just not realistic long term. As I said, there are times and things that you can do, or times that you can push if you feel like you have either a deadline, if you're prepping for something, or you just want to see what you can actually do or what you can actually achieve, and you can actually push that a little bit further on things. The other thing, and probably the most overlooked thing and most difficult thing, and this is even me speaking from my own experience and obviously working with clients over the years, is all of those habits and behaviors and all of the relationship issues that people have with food, essentially. And the one that you said there about always being told that you need to finish what's on your plate, like, that is just one of many, many, many. So anybody who is thinking about fat loss or thinking about controlling their calories or thinking about anything to do with nutrition, remember that you have essentially however many years old you are of bad habits and behaviors to overcome, and that's not going to happen overnight. And I speak with clients all the time, and they get frustrated whenever they have a quote unquote bad week, or they fall back into old patterns, or they have a stressful week at work and they find themselves in the snack cupboard or whatever else. I'm like, listen, we've had X amount of weeks in between where we haven't had a shit show like this. Like, you need to remember that it's so many years of negative relationship with food and bad behaviors around food that we need to overcome, whether it is overeating or undereating or whatever the issue may be. So it's not going to be an overnight fix, and it's not going to be something that happens straight away. And even sometimes, like, I find myself at the snack cupboard, and it's like my automatic reaction is to, like, either if I don't have anything to do or I'm like can't focus on something, I'm like, I need a snack. So I always find myself at the snack cupboard. So don't give yourself a hard time, and don't expect the journey to be perfect straight off the bat, because it is a difficult one. It's a lot to overcome. The other thing around nutrition, go ahead.
I was going to say, I fell into that obviously all the time, especially early on around, bad days where, I think I was like, I was like so strict with myself, like 6 months. Like, I was perfect on my macros. I was like really into it. And then I went over and I just needed like I just had a lapse, or not a lapse, but I think I just needed it, but I, when I went to that poker party and I had, a bunch of, chips and pizza and stuff like that, and I blew my calories out by like 800, and then the next day I come crawling to Ben like, I'm screwed, I'm fat, I'm all my habits are gone, I'm back to square one again, this is failing me. And Ben's like, dude, it's one day, you've like been on it for 6 months, like one day you're good, like you're solid, like hop back on and let's go. And I think that's the thing you have to tell yourself is like, and that's it's funny to think, like, I look at me today and I'm extremely happy of where I'm at today. But that's taken 2.5 years. Progress is slow. It really is slow. But when I look at the progress I was making at the time, it didn't seem slow to me because I was still seeing progress, right? And I think it's important for us to look at that and say, hey, I'm not where I want to be yet. And maybe I never will be. Maybe I always want to continue to change, right? It's just, again, lifestyle habit. You want to continue to progress. But look at like 3 months, 6 months, a year. There's always progress in some way, shape, or form being made there, whether it was my habits or what I was doing. So I think as long as you can stick to having more better days than not and focusing on those habits and getting back onto it, I think that's the biggest challenge that I see most folks is that, they're consistent on it for a few weeks or a month, but they don't let those habits form. And those habits can take months and months and months to become a norm in your brain. And you have to put the effort in place to go and do that. So, it's those habits that make things successful, and you have to be able to overcome the laziness, your mind fighting against you, all these different things to get to that point so that you are successful at everything that you do. And, I struggled with that so much going back and forth where I'd have days where I just didn't follow it, or I'd have a Wheat Thins episode. If you listen a few episodes ago, as 2.5 years into this, and I had a lapse on Wheat Thins, right? Wheat Thins are my crux, and I ate like basically a whole box of Wheat Thins. Like I just, some days you need a whole box of Wheat Thins, right? I now call Ben whenever I'm at the store and I have a box of Wheat Thins in my hand. So he's like, put the Wheat Thins down.
But like emergency diet.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important point to note. Number one, like the conversation around, have you fucked up all the progress? Like you said there, you were essentially on it pretty much meticulously for 6 months. That one day isn't going to fuck things up. And the thing that I will say is, with calorie counting and with sort of what we talk about, there's two sides to it. Number one, it's not something that I would force people to do forever, because it can be monotonous. Obviously, you can do it forever if you want. But the thing for me is, it's a good tool because it allows you to sort of A, understand food, and B, still have the freedom to have a quote unquote normal life. And what I mean by that is, like, you saying that you feel like you needed that blowout or whatever. All of those things can be accounted for if you have an understanding of what you put into your body. So, depending on the type of person you are, you can have, X amount of grams of Wheat Thins every day, if that'll tick the box for you. Or if you know you're going to eat Wheat Thins because you're playing computer games at the weekend, then you bank some calories and have that. So all of these things can be accounted for, whether it's pizza, whether it's going out for a drink, whether it's date night, whether it's, eating cake, like whatever it is, all these things can be accounted for. And I'm not saying that this is the only way to do this. There's infinite ways to lose weight and gain muscle and whatever it is. But I find that this gives people the most freedom to live a quote unquote normal life. And, with the people that I work with and with the people within the community, I think, they want to have it as a lifestyle, and they want to still be able to enjoy the holidays, enjoy vacation, enjoy going out for dinner, enjoy whatever it is that they want to do. And, having an understanding of how much food they need or how many calories they need, and having an understanding of how much calories are in food or in different things, and being able to balance them and have that as a tool. It's like unlocking a new level. Like their mind's totally blown. And I think that's the best thing for me to see, is whenever they get that understanding of, oh shit, right, like all these things that I've been told are bad, or all these things that would have thrown me off the wagon before, are all okay if I have an understanding of it, and I've preempted it, it's going to happen, and I can do all these things and sort of and stay on track. And I think that the falling on off the wagon thing is something that I see people sort of come to realize, that even if they do have a bad day, it doesn't mean it needs to be a bad week, that they're off it for a month, it's 6 months later, and then they're restarting. It's like, okay, right, like I fucked it, I ate the box of Wheat Thins, everything's okay, nobody died, we're good, we can start again tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's that discipline that I think makes the biggest progress with all of this, is the habits that you form to go back to those types of situations. And again, one day of Wheat Thins isn't going to screw 2 years of progress or 6 months of progress. It's just one day, right? So maybe you don't meet your weight goals for that week. Cool. Okay, so next week's going to be better, right? So these are the things that we have to take into consideration in the grand scheme of things of our lifestyle and habits. Now that we're changing to a healthier lifestyle, we're tracking our nutrition, we're going to the gym, we're getting some resistance training in. We're getting some steps in, we're moving away from that sedentary lifestyle. We're starting to establish those habits. Those are things that you build upon. Those are the foundations of things that you start to build upon to make everything successful. And one of the things that I highly recommend, and I'm, obviously Ben highly recommends as well, is some sort of calorie tracker or macro tracker. And it's not to say that you have to use this forever. I find that I have to use it forever just so I can stay pretty precise with what I'm doing. But, using a calorie tracker, at least initially, to understand the types of foods that you're putting into your body and the actual calories that you have, will help you get a baseline of what you can do. So if you go to, by the way, if you go to the wehack.health website and you go to the resources section, there's a total daily energy expenditure calculator there. You can enter in your height, your weight, gender, and then, your social security number, credit card information. I was kidding. Dog's name, maiden names, where, hospital you're born in or city you're born in. No, it's just basic information. And then it'll ask you, kind of what your lifestyle is. Is sedentary, more, lightly active, moderate active, very active. And then it'll calculate, a baseline total daily energy expenditure. And so from there, you say, let's just say your total daily energy expenditure is 2,200 calories. Okay, that's about average what I see, 2,000 to 2,200 calories. That 2,200 calories is something that you can say, okay, that's my baseline of what I'm going to start with. Now, if my goal is to drop pounds per week, the general rough estimate of what's best for weight loss is usually between 1 to 2 pounds per week. Anything more than that, you'll start to shed muscle mass. And so I'd recommend the low and slow type of way to get your calories under and don't drop too much calories so that you're always starving and hungry and upset. And again, you start to get the negative effects of that and your body starts to shut down. So if you want to go into a deficit, you can, it'll actually show you too, like, hey, if you want to lose, 1 to 2 pounds a week, here's the amount of calories that you should probably be taking. Okay. So now that you have the calories, you have to say, okay, well, what do I need to do from a macro breakdown perspective? What does it look like from a protein, carbohydrates, and fats perspective? Now, I would just focus on, at first, just getting the calories in to see what you're eating and to get to those calorie marks. And then from there, kind of fine-tuning the protein, carbohydrates, and fats. Now, for me, the way my body works, Ben, is very much the same way. Most folks will react very well to a relatively lower fat diet. So low fats, high carbohydrates, and high protein. All right, is usually going to give you enough energy through the day, keep you full from a protein perspective, and focusing on what you're trying to eat. Now, the recommendation is around 80% whole foods, which means, what came from the ground or, what came from, an animal, usually single ingredient type of food. So like lean meats, chickens, protein, steaks, things like that, as well as, things that you can do from like a bread perspective, like whole wheat type of things, again, single source type of stuff that you can do out there. And then from there, starting to break down your macronutrients in there. Now, those apps can really help you. There's one that I really like if you're just starting off that kind of takes a lot of this guesswork out of the equation. And a guy named Dr. Lane Norton developed this, and it's called Carbon. And it is a paid app, so you have to pay for this app. And I think it's relatively inexpensive. I want to say it's like $4, a month or something like that, if I remember correctly. And they have like a discount for the whole year or whatever. What's nice about that is as soon as you launch the app, it'll ask you the same questions as the total daily energy expenditure calculator. And then it will ask you, what your lifestyle is, all this other stuff, all this good stuff. And it'll automatically generate your total daily energy expenditure for you, as well as give you a breakdown of your macros, protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And then you can start to enter in the food. So what we mean about counting calories is every time, you go to eat something, you check the back of the box or you try to find it in the app, and you'll get more refined with this as you get along, like, portion sizes and things like that. A lot of times the calorie counts will be put on the websites of the restaurants that you go to. So, it gets a little bit more complex as you go along, but trust me, it's definitely doable. And from there, everything that you eat, everything you put in your mouth, every time you put something into your mouth, whether it's a soda, whether it's a piece of steak or whatever, you add that into that calorie tracker so that you're showing what you're eating from a carbohydrates, fats, and proteins perspective that allows you to get a baseline of what's happening. And then from there, you start to piece yourself together. And now I've talked about this before on the podcast, but one of the big things for me is, I made a promise to myself that I would log every single day as a testament to my habits. So it's ingrained in my DNA every time that I eat to log into my tracker. I think I'm at like 890 days or something like that of logging and tracking. It's just a thing that I find I can stick with, and it's kind of like one of those hardline stances, just like I go and work out, hardline stance of me actually going and doing it. So once you start getting more refined with logging, it's gonna be a pain in the ass for, again, starting a new habit might be a pain in the ass for the first few weeks or a month, but you start to get used to it, and then after that, it's kind of second nature. But that'll give you an understanding of how many calories you're eating, when you should shave things off, when you should eat more. Those types of things are paramount to getting into the nutritional side of the house.
Yeah, and with the tracking side of things, I was on a call with Scott earlier on. He was like, any recommendations for like getting, staying motivated to track? And I was like, the only way that I know that I will continue to track food is if I do it there and then while I'm either cooking it or eating it. Because after that, if I'm like, oh yeah, I'll track it later, I sure as shit I'm not going to remember what I had or how much I had, and it becomes a shit show and I'll not track it. So if we talk about building habits, one big thing that they talk about whenever you're trying to build a habit is find the cue for it. If you need a cue for tracking food, it is eating food. When you're eating the food, track the food. And that is the simplest way for me, anyway, to make sure that it gets done. And I also have to shout out Kev Cody, because he put in the BC Fam chat the other day that he had his 365, so a year of tracking food and coming into the new year. And actually somebody who made a New Year's resolution and stuck to it for the entire year. So have to shout out him for actually getting that done. But as you said, you're 800 and some days into tracking food. I think I lost mine on Boxing Day whenever I was in the middle of making pizzas or whatever. But I think I'm back to 7 days or something. But essentially, whenever you're doing it as you go along, the best practice for me, in my opinion, is to track it as you go while you're actually sitting there eating the food. For me, if I'm sitting eating a plate of food, my phone's in my hand, track it, 10 seconds and it's done.
Yep, and that's very similar to how I do it as well. But before my motto is, before I put the food in my mouth, I enter it in the tracker to go and do it. Right.
Phone eat first.
And, yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's those habits that allow us to be consistent with this, right? And again, I'm not saying you have to use a tracker forever if that's not your bag of tea, but at least you're understanding what you're starting to put in your body, at least for the first month or so. And then from there, kind of deviating, from that, or making bounces, especially if you eat the same consistent food every single day. It may not be necessary for you to go and do it. But for me, the information and decisions around what I'm going to eat and how I need to get my protein is important. Now, talking about protein, this is always like, how do I get, how much protein should I have? And, how do I get that amount of protein? Okay. So the general rule of thumb for protein is you generally want 1 pound or 1 gram of protein per 1 pound of lean body mass. Now, some people say 1.1, some people say 1.2, some people say 5, people are crazy. You really,
some people say not eat the protein at all.
Right. 1 gram of protein per pound of lean muscle mass. Now that is an ambiguous statement, because you're not going to know what your lean body mass is. Okay. Now, I would say, generally, if let's just say you're, 6'4" like myself, and you're 250 pounds and you haven't lifted a day in your life, I'd probably try to get around 150 grams of protein per day. Right. That would be kind of my benchmark. So, it's kind of an estimation. If you know your lean body mass, it's great. If you can get like an in-body scanner that could, somewhat detect your lean body mass or roughly where you're at, that may help. A lot of the newer, like Withling scales. Yeah, thank you. The Withling scales will tell you how much body fat percentage you have versus lean muscle mass. So there are things out there, and they're not 100% accurate, but at least to give you a baseline. But typically, trying to get taking your weight and then kind of fractionalizing it to get to that is the general recommendation there. So anywhere, for women, that's obviously very different. So it'd be a lower amount there for that side versus men. And getting to that point and then setting that as your number one priority is protein, and filling in the rest of your macros, whether that's fats and carbohydrates, doesn't matter at this point in time, and focus on those as your macro breakdowns. Protein first, is your number one priority. And then from there, kind of breaking things off. And, there's so many foods out there that have protein in it, broccoli, for example. Obviously, any type of lean meats are going to have a lot of protein in them. Protein shakes to supplement if you can't do those. Greek yogurts, cottage cheese. There's so many different things that you could do out there to go for those that may be a relatively lower calorie mark that give you the amount of adequate protein that you need as you're going through, if you can't get it directly through whole foods. So, hitting those protein marks is most important. And what you could also do too is substitute with what we call essential amino acids. So if you're not getting enough protein, you can use essential amino acids. You can buy them at any nutritional store. Most specifically are the branched chain amino acids, BCAAs. And drinking those can help. They're basically what is broken down after you eat protein. Your body breaks them down into branched chain amino acids and uses those for muscles. They're a calorie-free way of getting enough amino acids in your body so that you sustain muscle growth or continue muscle growth as you go through. So you can supplement with BCAAs as well. But generally rule of thumb is to get the protein in so you feel fuller and can continue to use those as you go along.
Yeah. So the reason that I sort of talk quite heavily about protein, especially at the start of anybody, if it's a fat loss phase or whatever, is exactly that. It's more difficult for your body to digest and process protein than it is any other macro. So essentially it takes longer. So what that means, it's in your system for longer. So what that means is it will keep you fuller for longer. And as we've touched on this before, like your body will burn anywhere between 20 and 30% of the calories that you consume from protein actually just in the digestion process. As a really general rule of thumb for protein, like I realize you can get so caught up in the numbers and whatever else. If I'm starting a client, if it's a female, I'll go anywhere between 110 to 130 grams, 140 grams. If it's a male, I'll go anywhere between 160 to 200 grams. I can pretty much guarantee anybody who's listening here who doesn't have a clue how much protein that they're eating, as soon as they track it, they will not be eating enough. So even if you're eating more than you're eating now, you're on the right track. And don't expect to just be eating 65 grams of protein a day today and go, right, tomorrow I'm going to start eating 200 grams, because it will be a fucking nightmare and it will be hard. So incrementally change and add things to it. A couple of tips for protein that I've sort of, I guess, established over time is, firstly, look at your plate. So whenever you sort of get an understanding of protein sources and what they are, whenever you're putting your plate of food together, look at the plate. The easiest way that you can eat more protein is just eat more protein or whatever you have on that plate per meal, rather than trying to reinvent and get stuff from other places. So if you're having, 2 eggs and a bagel and whatever else, just have 3 eggs and half a bagel. You can balance the calories like that. Or if you're having, 150 grams of chicken and whatever size you have more chicken and less of whatever the carb source is. Look at your plate and think, right, I need more of this and less of this to sort of balance out the calories. The other one is, don't be afraid of protein shakes, but don't rely on them. And what I mean by that is, you don't want to be drinking 3 protein shakes a day. Shout out Randy, because he was like, can I not just have 3 protein shakes? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. But don't be afraid to use it if it sort of ticks you over that line. You know what I mean? If your goal is 180 grams and you're getting 150 grams religiously from Whole Foods, and you need to have a Fairlife shake to get an extra 30 or 40 grams in, like, take that all day long, because it'll take you over that line and it'll make sure that you do get that. Another thing is, with protein, being able to sort of recognize that, yes, okay, it is in a lot of foods, but some aren't primary protein sources. And what I mean by that is, and we've spoken about this before when we've been in a surplus phase, is as your calories start to increase and you're eating more food, you will be getting more secondary source protein from bagels, oats, rice, whatever it is. So you need to sort of gradually increase that over time to make sure that you're getting the actual protein from a protein source.
Yep. And so the prioritization around protein is number one, right? And then, Ben, for you typically say, I don't care, especially initially, what you're doing from a fats or carbohydrates perspective, as long as you're hitting the protein goals in the calorie bars, right?
No, absolutely do not give a shit, because number one, it's overcomplicated. And number two, like for me, I've been there. Like I have had very specific macro goals in terms of, 240 grams of protein, 60 grams of fat, and 385.7 grams of carbs, or whatever, some ridiculous. There has genuinely only been one time in my entire past coming on 9 years of tracking food on and off that I have been bang on that number. And if you're a sort of person that needs to be like really dialed in and want to hit those numbers, that will fuck you off every single day not hit that number. And genuinely, like, the only reason it happened is I was close. I was always over my protein goal. That's fine. I sort of ticked that box quite early. But in terms of being super specific with the fats and carbs, like I didn't really give a shit, just use it as a rough guide. But there was one day I was close, and then I was like, I can hit this. And it was like, I had half a rice cake with 12.5 grams of peanut butter and a little tiny bit of jam. And I was like, hit it. So you're going into the cupboard and you're creating these weird, wonderful meals just to hit numbers. So don't overcomplicate it. Just focus on the protein and the calories first. The other thing is, people generally have a way that they eat, either based on where they're from in the world or what their sort of habits are. And you'll find that out over time. People prefer higher fats or higher carbs or whatever it is. And the other thing is, when you hit a plateau, or if you hit a plateau, you have another tool in the toolbox to play about with. So you're like, you know what, it's been a month and my weight hasn't moved. What the fuck's going on? That's whenever I'll delve a bit deeper and go, okay, right, can we increase the amount of fats you're eating and decrease the amount of carbs, or decrease the amount of carbs and increase whatever way around it is. So it gives us somewhere to go in it. And as I've said before, for me, I'm a fan of lowest effective dosing things and always having sort of room to grow into the program or tools, because essentially 9 times out of 10, at some point you will hit a plateau. And instead of me throwing absolutely everything that I know at you straight away, and we have really great success, but hit a plateau, and after that I'm like, yeah, just do 6 hours of cardio a day and come back to me. It gives me more realistic things to use and more realistic tools to sort of play about with. The other thing is, and you have been this person, is just naturally inquisitive people will want to know, right, okay, well, if I feel good at this and this is the way my body composition is with just managing calories and protein, what would it look like if I were to, this was the conversation, like, what would it look like if I did want to look at my fats and carbs? And it's like, I can give you the breakdown on how I would do it, but I wouldn't get too caught up in being super specific with the numbers.
Yeah, that's, it's funny because playing with those numbers, and if you're logging your food, you can make tweaks like that in various directions to help out, right? So like for me, we played around with, higher fats and lower carbohydrates and higher carbs and lower fats. And I found that I felt the most energetic and good on more carbohydrates, i.e. more energy, and less fats. You still need fats, obviously. You're not saying, eliminate fats. You can't do that, first of all. Second, you still want a decent amount of fats for your body. But those types of things, the tweaking of that, once you have a good framework down on the nutrition side, really makes this all just, kind of a playing game with numbers and having fun with it and trying to figure out what works best for you when you eat certain things. How does it make you feel? These are all the things I think, are beneficial as you start to get more in depth with nutritional aspects and you start to get more of an understanding around what's actually getting put in your body. You have the ability and more flexibility to change that up or, be able to do something a little bit different. So, it's just, playing with things and seeing what works and what doesn't. But, to get to your goals, you have to make those changes. You have to be consistent with it and know that you're going to fall off, but continue to rebound and go for it again.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, like, it needs to be an understanding of what works for you. So I know for me, like you said, lower fats and higher carbs work. I just feel better. I feel fuller. I feel stronger. If I delve a bit deeper or sort of dissect that a little bit, I know that my cognitive function is better if I have a high protein, high fat meal first in the morning rather than eating carbs. So it's like, even there's levels to it that you can sort of delve deeper in terms of, okay, right, overall I feel better on this, but I know that if I do it this way throughout the day, excuse me, I can actually control like my energy levels and how I feel throughout the day. So there's plenty of levels to it. And I would say that, again, ultimately with anybody, it's an understanding of what you need for yourself. And even with the numbers thing, like I had a call last week, and it's sort of having an understanding of the people that I'm speaking to in terms of calls and stuff is, if you find a way that you can almost gamify calories and the things that you're doing, it makes it a little bit more fun, I guess. It makes it a little bit more manageable, and you can have a sort of better connection as to what you're actually doing. And ultimately that's what it is. Once you've established the habits and the behaviors and the routines of your training and everything else, it literally becomes a number game, as in more cardio, more calories, less calories, and that will move you in the direction. And it's literally just playing about with numbers.
That's it. Well, now you got your crash course in masterclass in nutrition, which is fundamentally the most important thing to lock down. You don't need to do cardio, you don't need to do resistance training, but those are things that we would recommend on top of it, right? Cardiovascular health is really good. Cardio is not going to allow you to lose more weight unless you're dialed in very heavily into your calories and you create more of a deficit as you do more cardio. Again, we talked about this before on the podcast, but the biggest issue most people face is they do cardio, so they're more hungry, so they eat more. That gap isn't there as far as what they're able to eat and what they don't eat. So be cautious of what you're eating. And then the nutrition piece is that foundation of everything else that's built upon. So lock that down, get that going, and you will have a very successful journey in your health. Guarantee it.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, thanks for tuning in for another awesome week of Hacking Your Health. Thanks everybody for your support. If you like what we're doing, share us on social media and all the other avenues that you have that might benefit people. This is what we like doing and sharing the knowledge and information out there for everybody else. Check us out on our Discord, discord.gg/WeHackHealth, Twitter, WeHackHealth, as well as WeHack.health as our website. So really appreciate everybody's support throughout the years. Again, Happy New Year for the second week now. But 2023 is going to be awesome for everybody. I can totally feel it. And I see the energy from these folks. It's really great to see. So here's to your success and making the change and building those habits. We know we're going to do it.
See you next week.
See you next week. Later, all.